Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear guests, I would like to welcome you on behalf of the American Chamber of Commerce in the Slovak Republic to this very special second edition of Women in Business Conference. My name is Barbara and I will take you through 2 days virtual hybrid conference. At the beginning of the year, we found ourselves in a very difficult and unprecedented situation that was caused by the pandemic of coronavirus. A lot of people got sick. A lot of countries had to close their borders and encourage people to stay at home in their home quarantines. The closure of companies, factories, and schools, universities, and other institutions will have and has negative impact on our economy, but we have to find ways how to reinvent the way we live and work. I am very happy to welcome you here because together with our esteemed panelists and guests, we will talk about some of the challenges and opportunities arising during this situation. And we will also talk about managerial strategies that should be taken on board in order to create sustainable, resilient, and good working environment and societies. We will also address questions concerning women and women empowerment and their support. We have truly a fruitful afternoon ahead of us, and it is my great pleasure to welcome among us Ronald Blaško, the Executive Director of the American Chamber of Commerce in the Slovak Republic. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, honorable guests, members of the European Parliament, Deputy Chief of Mission, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here today in this seemingly unusual place, in front of your screens as well, of course. Once again, very warm welcome to everyone. I would like to reflect a bit on why we are organizing this event and why here. As some of you may recall, we have planned to hold this event after the last year very successful conference on the International Women's Day in Binarium. However, as subsequent events showed, our decision to call off the conference on the 8th of March, already before it was officially banned to hold public events, proved to be right. Originally, we intended to talk about prosperous society, about the role of women in companies and what we all can do to improve their potential, their position, and what we can do to make sure they have fair and equal treatment and remuneration. These are still important topics, but now we have a new normal. This is why we are here at our first hybrid, live and online conference at our new venue, and going to talk about women who are in the firing line in this recession. Globally, according to a global consultancy, women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable to this crisis than men's jobs. Let me explain a little bit. We have grown used to seeing men in blue-collar jobs bear the brunt of recession retrenchments. This time is different. Women hold a lot of jobs, being acts in sectors such as retail and accommodation. In the US, there is already a talk of the she-cession. In Australia, people speak of the pink recession. Another new thing, schools and childcare centers closed. Mothers have taken up the slack. In the UK, during the lockdown, mothers of primary school-age children spend on average 5 hours per day on homeschooling, while fathers only 2. We could go on. Globally, women take up to 70% of jobs in the healthcare and social sector, putting them at risk of pandemic and infection. According to the UN, we have also a shadow pandemic in domestic violence. It goes without saying that men are suffering as well. For example, they've been more likely to die of COVID-19 than women. Nevertheless, we are still learning how to cope with this situation and how the burdens of this crisis are falling on different levels and differently from the past recessions. Now that I would like to conclude on a positive note by asking, does the havoc unleashed by the COVID-19 contain also some good news for women? I hope so. I am sure that the line of distinguished speakers we have managed to gather here today will share with us their opinions, and they will also present plenty of encouraging and positive examples how opportunities presented by pandemic have been turned into improvements of women's role and position in our society. And if not, then at least they will share their opinion and ideas how we can and what needs to be done so that we do not move backwards on the progress achieved in the past years. Enjoy the debate. Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much for your inspiring words, Ronald. That was great. Thank you very much. I have a question for you guys in the audience, and also a question for those of you who are watching us online. Raise your hands. Who of you is employed? Who of you is unemployed? You don't have to raise your hands here. Who of you is self-employed? Who of you is on maternity leave or parental leave? How did you cope with the situation over the last 6 months where we were trapped at home in our home quarantines? I have to say and admit that it was very difficult and challenging for me because I had to find my work-life balance. I had to cater for my child. I had to deal with a lot of household stuff and still be able to work from home and find a quiet place where I could focus. And I'm sure that it was very stressful for everyone, but it seems that women were hit harder. They suffered more emotionally, and also they became victims of domestic violence. We are slowly returning back to our normal lives, and even though they may not be the same as they were before Corona, we have to find ways how to address the main issues and challenges, and how to go on and create resilient societies, economies, and empower gender equality. The aim of this conference is also to get you involved, and I am kindly asking you now to take out your cell phones, and you at home, guys who are watching us online, take your PCs, iPads, or any handheld devices, and we're gonna pose a poll question. Okay, so are you now online on your platforms? How do you wear your face masks when in public transport? Covering my mouth, under my chin, or on my forehead? And now it's your time to respond to the very simple question, which is also very, very acute and I think very relevant for these days. So I'm going to give you a little bit more time. Okay, so type any answer and click submit. You will be able to see on your screens when you are watching a chat button and a submit button on your platform. So we're gonna see the results. Okay, so 7% is saying they are covering their mouth. No, only 6%, it's jumping. But you can do better. I think we have only 32 answers. 34, okay, I'm gonna give you a little bit more time to complete this very simple task. Cool. So on your platforms, you will be also able to give us some feedback. And there are also feedback forms and an open question, so you can give us any ideas for improvements throughout the whole session. And you can also use the Slido to interact with us, to get engaged and foster the conversation, because we will also take some questions during the Q&A session. Maybe not all of them, but we will try our best. So we're gonna see the results. Okay, 40 people, 41 people. I'm going to give you a little incentive. We have also a prize for you guys. So if you get engaged and involved, we have a beautiful voucher, a gift voucher worth €100 from Interclinic. I think this is a good incentive, so you should get involved. Okay, so at the moment we have 42 answers. 95% is covering their nose and mouth, and this is a good answer because this is the way how we should wear the face masks. Okay, and covering mouth, only 5%, under my chin, 0%, and on my forehead, 0%. Okay, so we have clever people watching, and that's a good sign. Okay, we're gonna wait for 20, 30 more seconds, and we are ready to start our first panel discussion. In our first panel discussion, we will address whether men and women were affected by the global coronavirus and the pandemic to the same extent, or whether there were some differences. And I am very glad to welcome among us Lucia Ďuriš Nicholsonova, member of the European Parliament and member of the Bureau of the European Conservatives and Reformists Group. Welcome.
Thank you.
I would also like to welcome Natasha Franceschi, Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Embassy in Bratislava. Welcome.
Thank you.
And last but not least, I would like to welcome Miriam Lexmann, member of the European Parliament, who represents the group of the European People's Party Christian Democrats, and she will connect with us remotely. Hi, Miriam. Welcome. Where are you at? In Brussels?
Yes, in Brussels, in the European Parliament.
What's the weather like in Brussels?
It's very sunny.
Yeah, perfect. We have a sunny weather here as well. Yeah, great. Ladies, all of you are very successful. All of you have rich CVs showing your level of experience and expertise. Throughout your life, have you ever been in a situation where you thought that being a woman was actually an obstacle? Lucia.
Thank you. Actually, I've been in politics since 2010, so it's 10 years now. And through this period of time, I experienced many situations like you expressed. For instance, when a man, a politician, is enthusiastic about some topic, some issue that he wants to address, for instance, a fight against corruption, and he really gets enthusiastic, then the public considers him to be a leader worth following. But when a woman, a politician, does the same, then we are called hysterical. When I was fighting the vulgarity of the previous speaker of the Slovak National Parliament, he called me live on TV a small gypsy. And when I had to go to work after 5 days of giving birth to my third child, because of enormous pressure from the former leaders of the Slovak National Council, I was really targeted with tons of hate speech, mostly from women, though, who called me a bad mother, who wished me to get cancer, who wanted to call the social services to take away my children. I have 3, because I wasn't good enough, because I was working. So yes, I mean, I have tons of experience, and we could continue. I don't think this is the...
Thank you very much for opening up. What was it like for you, Natasha?
First of all, I just would like to thank AmCham for bringing us here today. I think this is a terrific opportunity, to focus a little bit on, women in the business world, and particularly how the coronavirus, has affected, women in particular. So big thanks to AmCham for bringing us together. So I am a professional diplomat, and I will tell you that when I speak to women who are interested in becoming diplomats, whether Slovak, whether American, or some other nationality, the first question they always ask me is it possible to both be a diplomat and have a family? How do you possibly manage this? And my answer is that it is possible, but it is significantly more difficult. In diplomacy, we change jobs every few years. And the reality is that men generally, still today, do not follow women. It is usually the other way around. So it is more complicated, and I think this issue of being a professional woman and also wanting to have a family, is not just unique to diplomacy. This issue extends to many other professions.
Thank you very much. Miriam, what about you?
Thank you very much. I was involved in a civil society sector practically since my secondary school. I did lots of activities in the civil society, and I got used to the fact of being circulated by men, or that time young men. And I think, of course, throughout my career, I felt situations whenever I said something, it was absolutely ignored, because all the people in the dark suits around me in the room ignored it. Oh, someone picked it up as his own idea, and it was then continued being somebody else's idea, whatever I said. But on the other hand, I have to admit that I think the situation is changing. And I believe that now women more and more so are respected. And then the society does understand that maybe certain features of women are bringing added value to the political discussions or discussions also in the business. I know that, for example, some of the high-tech businesses are deliberately employing women because they know that they approach to certain tasks differently, and that enriches the business approach to certain challenges. So yes, the situation is probably not easy, but luckily it's changing.
Thank you very much for your input. And we are coming back to the recent situation that we are undergoing right now, because according to the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the McKinsey Global Institute, and many other sources, the long-term impact of COVID-19 will be not the same for men and women. And we are currently experiencing the biggest setback in gender equality in a decade. And on top of that, the World Bank also reported that more female businesses were closing down during these last 6 months. So why is the crisis hitting harsher on women than men?
I think it's understandable because the previous economic crisis hit mostly the sectors where men were much more present, and those were manufacturing and construction. This crisis is very different, as it really changed the way of we live, and it limited the travel and social contact, and it hit mostly the sector of services, together with retail, hospitality, tourism, and in these sectors, women are much more present. And of course, women were much more unprepared for such a crisis because of long-term existing gender inequalities. We know from data that women earn less, save less, hold less secure jobs. They're more likely to be employed in the informal sector. They have much less access to social protection, of course, and the majority they are the majority of single parents.
Households.
Yes, and this is a very weak group of people, of course.
Natasha?
Yes, just to add to that, I think there's another key factor here, which is the reality is that women are the primary caretakers of children and the primary caretakers of, elderly relatives. Women also perform, most of the unpaid domestic, labor at home. So there's no question that women are being hit very hard by the coronavirus pandemic. If, children cannot go to school, if daycares are closed, and somebody has to stay home with the children, it is more likely to be, the woman. And that is especially true because, women still in most professions earn less than men. So if a family is making a decision, based on economics about, who should go to work and, who should take a back seat to be home with the child, it is usually going to be the woman that does that.
Mm-hmm. Miriam, would you like to add anything, or can we move on to next question?
I would maybe stick a little bit about the household shared, the time on household, because we know that the statistics show, it varies in different countries. But in general, in larger Europe, the research shows that when it's in general about 4 to 5 hours a day spent on household, women in some countries practically do 70% of the time, and in some other countries it's close to half, but it's always more than a half or at least a half of the work. We have to also take into account what's already mentioned as well, that during the pandemics, the children were at home, and there was, practically the family had to provide education, had to provide food, had to provide out-of-school activities inside of the house, because the children really needed to be amused and also mentally relaxed. And this was mainly the task of women, while they were supposed to work online. And I think this work-life balance, especially while working online, is something which is a challenge of the future, because we know that we are now facing the second wave of the pandemics. But also I think that the digital world is pushing us and providing us this opportunity to work from home, which is welcome. But on the other hand, we have to also look into the nuances of this new kind of employment, because obviously it has its pitfalls, which need to be also taken into account.
Yeah, I think we are all agreeing on that. Mm-hmm. And we will take a question from Slido. Okay, so what is there on the list? Mrs. Nicholson, you got stuck in Brussels for a couple of weeks without your family. How did you cope with the challenging situation?
Well, I got stuck in Brussels with 2 of my children. The third one, who is an adult now, stayed in Bratislava, which wasn't easy, of course, because never for such a long time we've been separated like that. And we survived because even though it wasn't easy, I was supposed to, lead many conferences via internet, but you can only do it if you have some place to hide, and this wasn't that easy in our household.
To find a quiet place to work from, right?
The smallest one is 4 years old, and he needs attention, of course, and the childcare, the kindergarten was closed, the school was closed. So it wasn't easy, but I have to say that a big help I received from my husband, who is very understandable. He's got home office, so we sort of shared responsibilities and duties in the household, and only through his huge help we made it possible. And it actually got us closer, because never ever I experienced days like I didn't have to hurry anywhere, because there was nothing, it was just, everything was at home. So I spent lovely moments with my children.
That's great, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna have one more question from Slido. Natasha, this could be for you. Do you think that public and private sector companies will transform their internal processes, enabling women to remain at home and work from home?
So I actually think this is an area of opportunity. I will say, so for my employer, for the U.S. Department of State, our foreign ministry, telework has not been something that has been widely available, to our diplomatic staff for a variety of reasons. And suddenly with COVID, we found ourselves in a situation where people could not come into the office, where people had to work from home. So we really had to test, our remote technology. We had to improve our remote technology. And we had to consider how we could think about, being more flexible for our employees. So in fact, there is now an initiative to sort of reimagine how we do our work. And our colleagues in Washington are looking at several different streams of activities to make remote work more accessible in the future going forward and to give employees more flexibility. So I would say that's a real positive that has come out of all of this.
Yeah, and we need to find ways how to adopt it to a level where it is beneficial for everyone, but also employees need to be in social interaction with their colleagues. So yeah, to find a balance between the social interaction and the flexible working arrangements. Before the crisis, the World Economic Forum predicted it would take another 257 years to reach economic parity between women and men. And it is very frustrating that the figures has to be set back by a decade. How do you think can we help women in the countries which were hit the most and in the economies which are suffering tremendously due to the COVID-19 crisis? Maybe you again, Natasha, because you spend a lot of time abroad.
Sure. Well, look, there's no question that in the, in many countries in the developing world, the pandemic has had a particularly detrimental effect on, women's progress. I think I saw the statistic, for example, that I think 10% of the world's population lives in Latin America, but a quarter of the deaths worldwide from COVID have been in Latin America. And, many of those countries have weaker public health systems where there are a lot of challenges. I would say that one thing I think all of us can do, to support women around the world in countries that are really facing acute crises, is to consider looking at ways to donate and to support international organizations, non-governmental organizations that are working around the world in some of the communities that are hardest hit, to provide, increased social safety nets, for women.
Thank you. What is your perspective on that, Miriam?
I think that there are a couple of things we need to do, and obviously they are different in the western part of the world and in the third countries. I would say in our countries, what I believe it's absolutely essential is to provide adequate social coverage to women who are either at home at a maternity leave or are working only partly because they're bringing up children. We know that the demographic crisis is practically bringing a big social challenge, and we know that families with children are the only sustainable moment in the whole social system. And that's why I believe that women should be adequately awarded for also the time when they're spending with their children, because this supports the sustainability of the whole social system. So for example, we know that the maternity leave, the time when woman is on a maternity leave, the calculation of this time to her pension scheme creates a very low pensions. And I believe that this is something which needs to be improved. In the third world country, I would maybe mention, of course, there are lots of issues which can be addressed, but I will mention one issue. I think what is absolutely essential is that Western companies employing women in the garment sector and other sector, it's important that they are provided proper jobs with certain security of these jobs, because that's actually the crucial issue which make the women in the third countries absolutely vulnerable to any economic shocks, is that their jobs are not sustainable and their jobs don't have any, practically, usually they don't have any legal way how to fight for their rights. So I think this is very important, that our Western companies should be the leaders in providing more secure jobs to women in the third countries.
Thank you very much for your input. Lucia?
Yes, first of all, I think that we It's our duty to finally start using the EU funds properly and effectively. And in this situation, we should really focus on the most vulnerable groups of people, women, of course, including. The whole world was hit by COVID-19. Of course, we have many EU member states who were hit really hard, such as Spain and Italy and so on. But there is a huge financial help coming from the EU funds. Actually, Slovakia will have so much money that we never ever experienced this amount of money. We just have to use it. And up until now, we were not able to use the European funds properly or to use them at all. Mm-hmm. So this is a great opportunity.
Can you also tell us why?
There are many factors. I mean, we made it so difficult for the recipients to get the money through bureaucracy that basically many people just gave up and many companies just gave up, and this has to change. The access to the money should be as flexible as possible. And the other thing is that, of course, organized crime was really focused in this country on the EU funds and the money coming from it, as it was a huge amount. There was a big amount of corruption, and we just didn't handle it properly. So there are many things, but we can't fight the corruption by using when it comes to EU funds, by making it impossible for decent companies, decent people, decent representatives to actually get access to the funds. This would be the worst case scenario if we did this with the coming money from the Next Generation Fund. And of course, according to the International Monetary Funds, the situation is particularly harsh now for low-income developing countries, as mentioned, and we can help them either financially, of course, donations and so on. This is our duty, but we also have to help them to, for instance, fight the gender role stereotypes, because this is the thing that makes it really impossible for women in these countries to start working. The work-family balance, there has to be a decent care system for the children when we want the woman to participate on the labor market. Because there is a huge lack of affordable care. This is something that also applies for Slovakia. I mean, we all know this story, that we just don't have enough capacities. And but the affordable care is not only for the children, but also for elderly, because what our women face usually is not only that they have to take care of the household and the children, but also
people as well.
Yeah, and the social services are not working very well in Slovakia. I mean, the financing is very poor, and this should be a priority for our government too.
Mrs. Franceschi, you spent a lot of time abroad. You were, prior to your assignment in Bratislava, you were in Washington and as director of the State Department's Office of Caucasus Affairs and Regional Conflicts. You also served as deputy director of the Office of Arabian Peninsula Affairs, deputy political counselor at Embassy Baghdad, and the list goes on. And you also spent some time in Islamabad, Astana, Sarajevo, and Moscow. And I think that we will agree that these are the countries where gender equality is in its infancy. So what should the local governments or global governments do to support women in these vulnerable groups?
So I think most of our countries, including my own, still have progress that can be made on and should be made on on women's issues and making women full participants in the workforce. A really key issue, I'd say, in the United States right now, just to speak a little bit about my home country, is the issue of how to bring children back to school safely. And this is a really key issue in terms of being able to return women fully to the workplace. I actually think Slovakia is quite lucky that you've got children who are back physically in school. But in many communities of the United States right now, children have started the school year online. And this presents, very significant challenges for parents who both are supposed to be working and, are now sort of the teachers of the online school. But it also underscores economic inequality. We are finding that in many communities, children do not have laptop computers to be able to get online. They don't have wireless access. They do, in many cases, do not have a parent who is there at home to help them. In some communities, they don't have, parents that speak English. And also for us in the United States, schools actually provide an important source of nutrition in underserved communities in terms of providing school lunches. And so without schools being in session, these economic inequalities are really being exposed. So I think one really key issue in terms of looking at recovery from the coronavirus is finding ways, and I mean it's a very, very challenging issue that many experts have different opinions on how to do best, but finding ways to return children safely to school, so that parents can return to the workforce.
Yeah. Miriam, what is your perspective on that?
You mean the first question or the second question?
Any question you pick. It's your time to react to any question. But maybe regarding the most hit countries and the communities and societies there.
I think what is important, of course, I mean, we need to provide immediate help, but we also have a plan how to help to change the situation. And I used to work in a NGO supporting democracy worldwide, the International Republican Institute before, and we had many programs in many countries where we are trying to bring women into public offices, into politics, because I think that we cannot support these women only from outside. We need to foster changes in the countries where women, if women will be part of the decision making, obviously as a result, there should be a proper legislation, there should be more secure jobs for women, and that will help women to be less vulnerable to the economic shocks. So I really think that we should have a short-term strategy, as Ms. Ďuriš Nicholsonova was mentioning, to support the current needs of those women in the third countries, but we should definitely elaborate more our long-term strategies, how to change the societal approach to gender and to the role of women in order to support the stronger position of women in the decision-making of the country.
Thank you very much. You wanted to react as well.
Yes, I wanted to react to Madam Franceschi, what she said about the education and the access of children to online education. Now, when we are talking about the third world countries, we also have to mention our socially excluded communities, which are the Roma communities in Slovakia, because there the people live in conditions of our third world countries. And the truth is that this COVID-19, this whole pandemic just showed us how unprepared are their households, for instance, for online education. They didn't have any access to online education. And this is very sad. When, we are a country, a member of European Union and so on, and really this is a big challenge for the future. For the second wave, if it comes and the schools would have to be closed.
How can we address these issues? Well, who can provide them with the technological support?
We need more people there. We need social workers. We need teachers who might be able to work with the kids there in smaller groups, in community centers. But first of all, we have to admit we don't have community centers in all the Roma settlements, and there are now almost no conditions how to educate the kids, maybe just to go from household to household. And I think it would be very naive that now we can connect all of the households to internet. So we have to find an effective way how they will still get some access to education. And I would suggest to work with the social workers, to launch the projects for social workers, for teachers who might be able to work with these kids. This could be effective. But we have to react very fast.
Yeah. That's.
Maybe
we have a question. Yeah. We have Miriam, please.
Yes, I just wanted to add one thing, is that during the pandemic, the first wave, when everything was locked down, the NGO sector was trying to provide lots of help to the needs which were created by the pandemics, which was like, as Ms. Ďuriš Nicholsonova mentioned, families who were supposed to homeschool children, but they had no connection to internet, or they had no laptops, or the mental health of people. I mean, we know that there was much higher societal tendencies among teenagers as well as adults, which needed to be treated. I mean, there are lots of new phenomena in the society which had to be addressed, and was usually the non-governmental sector addressing this, because that was far more flexible. So when we talk about the recovery pack of the EU, I think this is also parts where we need to invest the money, because obviously these shocks and the kind of waves of needs might come also in the future, and we have to be ready for it to provide the help. And I would like to also mention one thing, is that of course we have to spend this money in such a way that it will pay, the investment will pay itself. But on the other hand, I think, for example, increasing salaries of teachers, which are mainly women, is an investment which is worth, because we will have a better quality teachers and better quality teaching, and the whole education system will, the quality of whole education system will increase. And we know that women are the majority of the workers in the education sector. So I believe that we also need to think strategically about the different sectors, how to spend these EU funds and this opportunity we have got through the EU funds strategically.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's going to be very hard to implement these measures, and it's a long-term strategy rather than tactics. We have a question coming from the audience. Please.
Madam Nicholsonova, you are speaking about a really important topic, and I would say it requires a structural change within the society. But when I take a look at the audience, and we have mostly women here talking to women, and if I take a look at the number of panelists, men are really in minority. Do you see within the European politics men as leaders for positive change which needs to be done, and also here in Slovakia? Because I think it's not about women talking to women, men should be included. So do we have kind of positive deviation here in Slovakia, because also Slovak politics as well as Brussels politics, as well as in Brussels, these male leaders, so-called, which are required in order to achieve positive changes within the society. Of course, we have already President of the ECB, a female one, President of the European Commission, for the first time, both female, very ambitious, very capable, which is absolutely fantastic, but this is not enough. So where are the men? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I think that we can achieve nothing without men. I really think that we have to do this together, and without men, the change is impossible. And I can see it on the level of European Parliament, European Commission, European Union as such, that the discussion is between men and women as equal partners. This is very important. I'm not as optimistic when it comes to the national level. I think still it's what I said at the beginning, that when a woman gets enthusiastic, and there are topics that we can get enthusiastic about, we are considered to be hysterical. And there is always, the big man who is the big leader, who is better than us, who can do better than us. But also as a society, we are much more critical towards women, and women are critical to women. Sometimes our biggest critiques are not men, but women.
Jealous women.
And, I
Sometimes.
never experienced, when it comes to a man leader, when he goes to work after his baby was born, I've never experienced any discussion about that. Nobody asked him, why did you do that? Why did you go to work when you have a small baby at home? But these questions always appear when a publicly known woman goes to work and everybody knows that she has a small child, So I don't think this is fair, because behind every successful woman there is a man who helps to achieve the success. This is my experience. This is without my husband I wouldn't be able to do what I do and what I love. And really, I think there is lots to be done. We have many obstacles in our mentality as a society, the Slovak society. But I think it's my duty, for instance, to fight against the stereotypes that are so deeply in our mentality still.
I would like to hand over to Miriam, because you have also some observations from the European Parliament. So what is your take on that?
As I said at the very beginning, is that I think the society is luckily changing in the Western world, and it is, as it was in the question, like, where are the men? I think they are men who realize that if they will bring more women on board, we will be more efficient in answering to the different challenges that are coming in our societies or globally. And I believe that this is really the strategy. If we will, in the partnership, we'll find space where there will be more dialogue going on about the different approaches, and where women will be brought on board. I think this is practically the solution, and I think it is happening. We have to push for it. We have to be probably quite clear that this should be one of the goals we reach. But I think now, as it was said, with women leaders on the key positions of the European Union, I think this trend is already there, and we have to make sure that it will not turn the other way around, that men's position will be weakened, because I believe that this is something where we should really show the equality and joint approach to stand up to the challenges.
Thank you very much. To spice up the conversation, we are going to take another question from Slido, and thank you very much for contributing to our discussion. We really appreciate it. According to the UN, the domestic violence increased by 25%, which puts women in a very vulnerable situation. What is your perspective on that? Are there any social protection initiatives at place? Natasha.
Sure. I think the increase in domestic violence is being experienced in countries around the world that are affected by COVID-19. I saw a statistic from the Slovak Prosecutor General that during the height of the COVID crisis, the number of reported domestic violence, incidents of domestic violence, had increased by almost 50% over the same period last year. This is a big issue in the United States as well. I've seen that President Chaputova has been very outspoken on this issue. And a big, advocate, to draw attention to, to this specific problem. And I think, I think that's really important. I will say, in terms of the United States overall response, we have given over $11 billion to worldwide COVID response efforts, and a portion of that has been specifically directed towards to look at, gender issues as part of the COVID-19 crisis. And just in terms of what our embassy here in Bratislava has done, We annually do a July 4th party to celebrate our Independence Day. And this year we decided not to do that and to do a charity campaign instead. And the organization
For women.
We decided to support a domestic violence shelter here in Nitra, recognizing the significantly increased, needs to support, women in situations of domestic violence.
Very generous of you. Lucia, you have some interesting statistics when it comes to domestic violence.
All of the statistics show that it's been very bad when it comes to domestic violence, and we knew it because when the lockdown came and we knew that the victims were all of a sudden closed in one room, in one flat, with the men or abusers and partners and so on. So we should have seen it was coming. And in some countries, I think the reactions were much faster than in some other countries. I wrote immediately a letter to our Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs so that we take the measures to fight the domestic violence during the pandemic. Those were very easy and concrete steps.
Can you be more specific?
Yes, I suggested that, for instance, we would use the hotels that were empty because of the lockdown as shelters for women. Because, in general, this pandemic, when it comes to the domestic violence, showed us how small amount of money we invest in taking measures, whether there is a pandemic or not. So it really found us unprepared. And I have to say that the reaction of our government was quite slow, and I think we should
Do you know
really.
The reasons why, or
I think they had other priorities. But to me, the vulnerable people, and in this case, the victims of domestic violence, is a group of people who deserve our attention. And we should consider it as priority even now, because now we have to learn from the situation, and we should definitely, there are funds coming from European Union that we can use to support measures like training of police people, training of psychologists and so on, so that we can actually get ready for another situation like that.
Miriam, many governments have adopted a broad range of support measures to help individuals and societies and businesses. Some of these measures were mainly social protection initiatives adopted by some central and local governments, and they were specifically targeted at women. Have you adopted any specific policies in the European Union and European Parliament that will financially support women?
Well, the European Parliament has come up with a range of policies which we passed during the pandemics, and then of course the implementation is on the member states. They were policies which were indirectly focused on women, because obviously, we are trying to support all the socially vulnerable sectors, and women are in many of those. But also there was a particularly women as a socially and particularly vulnerable groups. They were mentioned in many laws the European Parliament has passed in order to help the government to help these women directly. So of course, these measures had to be taken by the member states. So it was not something which we would dictate the member states. Practically, we made flexible the funding of the unspent European funds for the member states, and the member states could use it in order to efficiently address the needs. And of course, we were practically in every legislation piece, we are asking that women and children and the socially vulnerable groups, as well as elderly people, including people with disabilities, including people who are carers for people with disabilities, mothers, and big families, they were among those who were always listed as the target of the financial schemes that the government should have come up with.
Yeah. Lucia?
I would say that at the beginning, the European Commission didn't react fast enough to the pandemic. I mean, we all expected from the European Commission or European institutions as such that they would coordinate the measures taken by certain member states. And this didn't happen, but what happened was that really relaunched a huge financial support to the member states to combat the consequences of the pandemic. And in these targets, in these funds, they were not specifically targeted on women, but of course, the help also went to women. We had the mechanism of SURE, which
Could
is
you count it somehow, or?
Oh, those
Other
were billions of euros. That, of course, it was up to the member states how they are going to use it, how effectively they are going to use it. For instance, we came up with SURE, which is the EU funding for short-time work schemes with a budget of 100 billion euros. So this should really help the workers who had to stay at home to get some income. Then we had the Corona Response Investment Initiative, which enabled member states to flexibly use money of cohesion funds to help those ones who suffered from the crisis. And these were healthcare workers, hospitals. Most of them are women, of course. Then to help the small and medium enterprises and to the workers as such. Then we had European Fund for European Aid to the Most Deprived. And this is something I think very interesting when we are talking about the women as a vulnerable group of people who had to deal with the consequences. This is a fund that provides food and basic material assistance to the most deprived, and many of this help went through to the single parents, and most of them the majority of them are women. So they also got help through this fund.
So you have mechanisms that can track whether the help was really distributed to those people in need?
Definitely we do, and we collect the data and we evaluate the use of the money, whether it was effective or not, and whether all the groups, vulnerable groups, received what they are supposed to receive from this fund. But it is up to the member states to say which of the groups are the most vulnerable ones who should get the help from this fund.
Thank you very much. We looked at some of the most vulnerable groups across the globe, and women in third world countries and developing countries were hit really hard. But the situation is a little bit different from women in the European Union and in Slovakia. So what are the biggest challenges that we are facing here in European Union and in Slovakia, because clearly not all of the women and female workers had to close down their businesses or lost their enterprises? Natasha?
Well, I would say, I mean, the domestic violence issue is a really serious issue. As I mentioned, the statistics I've heard about how this is affecting families throughout Slovakia are really significant, but that's not, it's not just confined to Slovakia. I mean, it's a problem in all the countries that have been hit by that. So I would highlight that as one aspect.
From your perspective, how do you perceive it?
Well,
not just the domestic violence, but also other challenges.
Yes, I mean, especially for Slovakia, I think that every woman who wants to go to work, who wants to work, should work, whether she has children or not. And now in these days, it is not really possible because of the lack of the preschool facilities. So I would start really with this to make access to all of the young families with children to preschool facilities. Even the Council recommendations on Slovakia's national reform program repeatedly point out the persistent gap in employment and pay between men and women. In Slovakia, this is another problem that we have to fight because it's above above the average in European Union. So I would say these are the two things. And also when we are talking about the low employment rate of women, especially in Slovakia, it is also caused by long parental leave. I mean, this is according to the data, and they really show us that after 2 kids, it is not easy.
6 years when you add it up together.
6 years, and you know, I mean, it is a huge gap. The labor market is really very progressive,
very
progressive, and 6 years out of the labor market it really makes it very difficult for women to get back to labor market and succeed. So this is another issue, whether there is pandemic or not, that we have to seriously discuss.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We will take another question from our Slido. Miriam, a question for you. Is Commission preparing some policies, advices for local governments within EU related to the rules, benefits for parents, which will need to stay at home because of COVID?
This is mainly the legislation which should be addressed by the member states due to the division of the task or the competencies of the European Union. Obviously, the European Commission is monitoring the situation in the member states, and it's trying to address the needs which are actual in the different countries and in the European Union as such. And in terms of to respond to the issue of the situation of women, I would maybe bring up a couple of issues. I mean, we in the Social Committee of the European Parliament, we are looking into the fact which I already mentioned, which is, first of all, the gap. Practically our families, especially after having a third child, are facing poverty. In many member states, of course, the amount of children where the family starts to face poverty varies in the different countries. But this is something the European Union is trying to look into because of the demographic challenge. So practically this issue is being addressed also vis-a-vis the demographic challenge we are facing as the European Union. We know that we need to provide broader support to families, which normally means in practice that the maternity leave, and when we bring it to Slovakia, is so low that pushes women that they're trying to go to the labor market as soon as possible, but taking jobs which are very low paid because they need also the flexibility to still stay or support their rather small children. So in order to give more space for a woman for a choice when she wants to go to work and what kind of job she wants to take, that if we increase the maternity or the support to families with children, or the support for children, I would say, that will help. Also, as I already mentioned earlier, the pension scheme needs to be restructured in order to address or reflect, I would say, in order to reflect the value family has for the whole social sector. But I would say another issue which is now being picked up by the EU, but it also needs to be picked up by the member state, and is the change of the labor market. I mean, we know that the artificial intelligence and digitalization is enormously changing the labor market. And we know that women are less involved less interested in the education in IT sector, and also there are less women working in the IT sector. And this is something which needs to be supported, that women will study IT and will take jobs in the IT sector, because this is the future. And if we are not helping women to get ready for this change, women will be again losing because of the change, where actually this change can help them, because these new technologies can help with the household, can help those women who are caring of the elderly people. So there will be help provided by the new technologies. But if women will be not able to embrace this help, it will make them even more vulnerable on the labor market.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, thank you very much. I absolutely agree with Miriam, because all of the data show us that it will be women who will be really much more affected on the labor market with coming artificial intelligence and other IT things. And we really need for our women, especially in Slovakia, because we are not ready for the automation at all. The whole labor market is not ready compared to other countries such as Finland, for instance. And we really need effective lifelong learning for our women to prevent the loss of job. We have to start working with them in educating them with soft skills. And but the very interesting thing is that when we are talking about teleworking and online work and so on, which might make it easier for the Slovak woman, a big topic, a big issue that we are dealing with now in European Union is the right to disconnect, because this is really something that is becoming a problem. That if you work, using some
laptops and cell
online
phones.
Yes, I mean,
emails.
when is the time for you to disconnect? Then you are always connected and basically always working. And this is becoming a serious issue that we are discussing right now at our committee in the European Parliament, and we are trying to find a good solution for everybody, for the employees and for the employers.
We are not disconnecting right now. We are connecting to you guys, and feel free to contribute to our discussion. And I think that we have one question from the audience. Please, Ronald.
Thank you for letting me ask another question.
You're very active. You will get the gift voucher.
Okay, that's my ultimate intention. This is a question I would like to ask basically all the speakers. The reputation of V4 countries is not really that great in Brussels currently. And we are considered to be, kind of troublemakers, maybe not Slovakia, but in general the region, and also to be considered like a kind of quite conservative region. Nevertheless, Slovakia, as the first country in the region, has already got a female prime minister as well as a female president. Are we different, or we are not that different from our neighbors? Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you very much. Would you like to react?
I hope we are different. I mean, you can see it with our president. Really, so far, Slovakia was well known because we had Sagan. I mean, right now there is a Tour of France, I'm watching it, and I've been always so proud that none of our politicians made such a great promotion for our country
and the hockey players.
As Sagan, but
don't forget about the hockey players.
They're old now, but Sagan can still win.
Yeah, we are still living from the fame from 2000, right?
But right now, it's not only Sagan that Slovakia is very well known all over the world, all over the European Union, but it's our Madame Čaputová, the president. And this is, it always makes me so proud when people, stop by in European Parliament. They say, "Oh, you're from Slovakia. You have the greatest president ever," and they are very jealous about our president. So I think this is a great news to our society. This is a great message that we send to the world, that we are different. Because I'm watching very closely the situation in Poland with the abortion law and the sexual education teachers ended up in jail and so on. I actually am in one political group with representatives from PiS, from the Polish government, which makes it really not easy for me because I'm a liberal. And together with Hungary, the V4 is not the best company for us anymore. I would say so. In not a very diplomatic way, but I'm honest in this one.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm also a big fan of our president, Mrs. Čaputová. We are coming towards the end of our discussion, but I would like to pose one more question, because it is estimated that around 195 million of people will lose their jobs due to the pandemic, out of which the majority are women. And some of the jobs will be gone forever, or at least we need to reassess and transform some of the jobs. And simultaneously, women represent the biggest opportunity for economic growth in a full potential scenario in which women play an identical role in labor market to men. We can add as much as 28 trillion American dollars to the global GDP. So how are we going to create new opportunities for women when we are in a situation like this? Natasha.
Yes, I mean, I would say, first of all, look, the benefits of having diverse and inclusive teams are very, very well known. So I think we have to keep, pushing and encouraging, all of our employers, to really look at embracing diversity and inclusion. Second of all, I think, mentor networks and, supporting women, and that doesn't have to just be women supporting women. That's also, as my colleague here said, it's men supporting, women also is really important. So we have to empower younger women. We have to give them skills, and we have to help inspire them so that they can become full participating members.
Thank you very much. Miriam, handing over to you.
I would completely agree that, it obviously varies in the third world country and in the more developed or Western countries, what support women need. I think in our geopolitical space, we need to provide or support women in getting education in the trendy sectors, which I already mentioned before, and also encourage companies to employ women in high positions, because this can bring profit to the companies as well as the governmental sector as well. And luckily, we already do have women in the political leadership. In the third world country, I think this is practically our effort should be to support security, more secure jobs, and really paid jobs for the women, and as well as support women to run for political positions, because I think this is one of the only ways how we can change the societal approach to the gap between men and women.
Thank you. Final words from you.
Yeah, I have a list of specific measures that we should take. First of all, promote work-life balance through flexible work arrangements. This is necessary. We have to ensure access to affordable care when it comes not only to children, but also to elderly people. We have to eliminate discrimination, because there is still discrimination at the labor market. We have to achieve equal pay for equal jobs. This is very essential. We have to tackle occupational segregation, because it is women now who in occupations regarded as unskilled or low valued. So this has to change, and create quality care jobs also for women who work in this sector, but they are very poorly paid. So I think with this, we should be doing fine.
Yeah, thank you very much once again for joining in, ladies. Thank you. Thank you, Miriam, for being online. It was a very fruitful and inspiring conversation, and hopefully we will achieve the goals that will empower and support women during this phase. Thank you once again. A big applause for ladies. This was our first panel discussion, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And we learned that we found ourselves in a very difficult situation, and especially women who had to care for their families and take on some childcare responsibilities. They lost more jobs globally because they are working in sectors which were very sensitive to the crisis, such as tourism and retail and also other sorts of sectors. So in order to improve the situation, we have to make the access to money easier, and we also need to find a work-life balance for working mothers. We need to eliminate discrimination, and it is also very important to get children back to school to enable women to get back to their work and their job positions. So I am very glad that we had this conversation, but we have to move on, and the next panelist, not panelist, but the next guest will be Katarina Hutirova, the founder and owner of the second-hand store Nosene, who will talk about the sustainable and slow fashion. And on top of that, she will give us some useful tricks how to build a sustainable wardrobe for life, and what is also the capsule wardrobe, which is very popular recently. So I am handing over to Katarina.